The envelope didn't look like trouble, just thick enough to matter smooth ivory stock, the kind of weight you feel in your fingers before you even open it. It slid through my mail slot that morning, quiet, soft, while I was folding towels still warm from the dryer. The air smelled faintly of lavender and dryer sheets. I remember that because it was the last ordinary moment before everything cracked. It came from the Connecticut Department of Health Vital Records Division. At first, I thought it was some bureaucratic mistake, maybe a form I forgot to sign, but my name was typed across the front, Claire Elaine Whitmore, and I hadn't used my full name on anything since I left Stamford 3 years ago. I sat down at the kitchen counter, cleared away a chipped coffee mug and a magazine I didn't subscribe to, and opened it with the back of a butter knife. Inside was a death certificate. Official, stamped, blue ink, raised seal. Deceased Claire Elaine Whitmore. Date of death, June 12, 2020. Cause accidental drowning location, Tulum, Mexico. I didn't scream. I didn't even blink. But my hands had gone cold. The kind of cold that starts in your fingertips and works its way up like the body is pulling everything inward to survive something too unreal to process. I checked the birth date. Mine. Social security number. Also mine. Even the last known address listed my old place on Water Street was mine. I wasn't dead, but someone had gone to a great deal of effort to make it official, which meant this wasn't a mistake. It was a decision. I picked up my phone and called the only person I still trusted, Maya Greer. She used to be my roommate back at Parsons. Now she's a legal consultant for estate law in New Haven. Sharp grounded, never rattled. She answered on the second ring. "Claire, I just got a death certificate," I said. Silence. Then her breath shifted. "In your name, yes. Filed in Hartford. It's dated June 2020. Another pause. Longer. "You need to come in," she said quietly. "Now." I stared at the envelope again. Not just a document, a message. And I hadn't even gotten to the part where it said who filed it. Mexico wasn't my idea. It was my father's. Russell Whitmore was never a man who yelled. He didn't need to. He had a way of saying things that sounded like options but settled like orders. "You need space, Claire," he'd said. "You've been tense, unfocused. Take a sabbatical. Clear your head. Don't worry, we'll cover it." I should have known. It was May of 2020. Just a few months into the pandemic. I'd been freelancing in New York, trying to build my own design firm after walking away from Whitmore & Sons, the family's real estate empire. They said I was wasting my degree. I said I was saving my name. The flight to Tulum was quiet, the hotel elegant, minimal, just my style. Too perfect in hindsight. The first day felt like a breath. The second, my bank card failed. I called my bank. No issues on their end. Must be a local glitch. By day 3, my phone stopped working. The SIM card failed to register. No calls in, no calls out. The hotel manager suddenly couldn't find my reservation in the system. Asked me politely to leave. By the time I found reliable Wi-Fi at a small cafe, I'd been off-grid for almost 7 days. No messages from my family, no missed calls. No, "Are you okay?" Nothing. I sent emails. I texted Maya. I even messaged my sister Ivy, just a dot and a question mark. I heard nothing back. And that's when something inside me folded. Not shattered, just quietly bent inward like a bridge straining under weight. I booked a last-minute flight to Houston, then to a friend's apartment in Portland. I didn't tell anyone. Not because I was hiding, but because somehow they'd already stopped looking. I buried the memory like a bad invoice, unpaid, unread, shoved to the back of the drawer. For years, I told myself it was paranoia, miscommunication. Maybe they thought I needed more space. Maybe I'd made it too easy to be forgotten. But now, sitting in my kitchen death certificate in hand, it wasn't a theory anymore. They hadn't just forgotten me. They'd erased me. And they started the moment I left the country. I met Caleb Dawson once when I was 19. Back then, he was just the man in the gray suit who handled my grandmother's estate. I remembered his voice, low, slow measured, like a metronome, and the smell of his office dried paper and peppermint oil. The scent hadn't changed. He looked up when I stepped inside. "Claire." In the flesh, I said, and because I didn't trust myself to sit still, I stayed standing. He gestured to a chair anyway. I took it. I placed the death certificate on his desk. He read it slowly, expression unreadable. I never believed it, he said finally. But I also never had proof otherwise. I'm here now, I said, and I need to know what they've taken. He opened a leather folder, thick, worn edges softened by time. Inside were copies of my grandmother's trust documents. Elaine Margot Whitmore, founder of Whitmore & Sons, and the only person in that family who ever saw me as something other than an accessory. She left you her personal estate, Caleb said. $6 million tax optimized, plus the Vermont property. But she added conditions. He paused. You must be legally alive at the time of transfer, and you must not be involved in any capacity with the family business. That sounds like her, I said. She thought being born a Whitmore was already burden enough. He nodded. But there's one more thing. He pulled a document from the folder and slid it toward me. Clause 17, Dormant Status Provision. If the named beneficiary is presumed deceased or fails to respond to probate summons within 3 years of the grantor's death, the estate reverts to the residual Whitmore family trust. Deadline May 27, 2024. I did the math in my head. 92 days. That's how long I had left. If I didn't reverse the death certificate, restore my legal identity, and validate the inheritance before then, the entire estate would legally belong to my father and brother. They hadn't just erased me for revenge. They'd done it for access, and they'd almost gotten away with it. Caleb slid me a copy of the trust and leaned back. I can help you file, Claire, but this won't be quiet. I don't need quiet, I said. I need daylight. He gave a small, sad smile. Then start digging. And be careful. They've had a 3-year head start. I left his office with 2 folders in my bag, one holding the terms of my grandmother's trust, the other a reminder that somewhere out there my name was already spoken of in the past tense. The envelope this time was hand-delivered, cream-colored, embossed with the seal of the Connecticut Probate Court. It arrived just after 9 a.m. while I was adding sticky notes to a timeline Maya and I had drafted on my dining table the night before. Inside, Petition for Emergency Conservatorship, filed by Russell Whitmore and Jacob Whitmore. Grounds: ongoing delusional behavior, paranoia, emotional instability, inability to manage financial decisions. There was a note in my father's handwriting clipped to the front. It wasn't personal, just factual, like he was documenting a malfunction. We believe Claire is a danger to her own legacy. Her refusal to acknowledge reality is affecting the family's integrity. I didn't laugh. I didn't cry either. I just folded the document once, then again, and placed it on the table. Then I walked calmly to the kitchen sink and threw up. Not because I believed any of it, but because I recognized every word. They weren't inventing new lies. They were weaponizing old ones. Back in 2020 in Mexico, I spent 3 nights in a private clinic after a panic episode brought on by heat exhaustion and the loss of my passport. It wasn't a breakdown, it wasn't psychosis. It was shock, and my family paid the bill quietly, then never mentioned it again. Until now. Maya arrived 20 minutes later, saw my face, and didn't ask. She just picked up the envelope, scanned the header, and exhaled through her nose. "We'll need your medical records," she said. "I still have them," I replied. "I kept the originals." "Good. We'll also need a counterstatement from the clinic. I already called. They'll overnight it." Her mouth twitched somewhere between a smile and a frown. "You're good at this," she said. "No," I replied. "I just know how far they'll go." We worked in silence the rest of the morning, organizing files, labeling every interaction. We weren't preparing for a court case. We were preparing for war. By noon, my sister Ivy showed up. She was the last person I expected to see. Her hair was pinned back neat proper, just like our mothers used to wear it, but her hands were shaking. She held a manila envelope to her chest. "I shouldn't be here," she whispered. I said nothing, just stepped aside and let her in. The address was scrawled in Ivy's handwriting, barely legible, like she hadn't meant to keep it. Walker Storage Facility, Bridgeport, Unit C21. 3rd floor, no camera coverage, no windows. the kind of place you'd forget existed unless you were paid to remember. "You sure this is real?" Maya asked as we pulled up. I nodded. If they're funneling money through shell companies, they had to keep physical copies somewhere. And Russell never trusted cloud storage. With us was Eli Martinez, a forensic accountant Maya had worked with on a fraud case 2 years back. Quiet, blunt, brilliant. He carried a hard case with cables, backup drives, and one portable scanner that looked more military than legal. 2 hours, he said. In and out. Inside, the air was heavy with dust, cardboard, and toner. We climbed a stairwell that groaned under our weight. Every step sounded like we were entering a place not meant to be walked back into. Unit C21 was behind a rusted metal door. No lock, just a broken latch and silence. Eli opened a dented file cabinet in the corner. 5th drawer down a red folder labeled Archive 9, Client Risk Reports. Inside, copies of loan agreements with Eclipse Finance forged with my name. Transfers to Legacy Recovery LLC, a Delaware-registered shell company. A passport scan that looked eerily real except for one thing. The expiration date. I'd never renewed my passport that year. "Here," Eli said, pointing to a line on one document. "Borrower, Claire E. Whitmore. Amount $2. $400,000. Jurisdiction, British Virgin Islands. They used your identity to move funds through offshore accounts," Eli muttered. "Structured just below mandatory reporting thresholds. It's textbook laundering, and it only works if you're dead." He flipped the page. There it was. A memo from Jacob Whitmore to someone named Bernard Lake, the family's corporate counsel. Subject Phase 2. Discredit plus invalidate. If she resurfaces, we go psychiatric. We already have Alan on standby. Alan, Dr. Alan Kirshner, the name on the fake psyche val. My breath caught in my throat, not from fear, but from the quiet confirmation. This had never been about concern. It had always been about containment. Eli copied the files to 3 drives, each one labeled and sealed. One for Caleb, one for the AG's office, one for insurance. We left the building without a word. Some truths are too big to say out loud the first time. I sat in the car staring at the plastic case in my lap. "They didn't just try to erase me," I whispered. "They built an empire out of my disappearance." The rain that morning was light but steady enough to turn the courthouse steps into mirrors. I saw myself in each one. Black coat, hair tied back, eyes steady, and over it all the unfinished blazer I'd once designed and never dared wear. The courtroom was on the 4th floor. Fairfield County Probate Court. A clerk glanced up as Maya and I entered, eyes widening but didn't speak. Behind me, Caleb walked in silence. Beside me, Eli held a sealed evidence envelope. We weren't there for spectacle. We were there for correction. But the moment I stepped into the hallway, the temperature changed. Conversations hushed. A woman dropped her pen. Someone near the window whispered, "That's her." Phones rose like reflexes. The dead daughter had returned. At the courtroom door stood Russell Whitmore in a navy suit and a stillness that bordered on contempt. Beside him, my brother Jacob paced like a man too tightly wound. My mother Charlotte was a step behind them. Pearl earrings, gray trench, not a single wrinkle out of place. She looked up as I approached. Didn't blink, didn't speak, just looked. And then she said soft and cold, "Claire." Not, "You're alive." Not, "How just my name," like it had never been missing. I passed them without pause and stepped into the courtroom. The clerk behind the desk froze halfway through filing papers. "I'm here to file a motion," I said, my voice clear, "to revoke a death certificate issued in error, and to reinstate my legal identity." He stared, then slowly reached for the folder in front of him. Caleb spoke next. "We have documentation ID, travel records, medical files, notarized letters from both myself and the attending physician from Vermont General." The judge, a woman with steel gray hair and square glasses, adjusted her seat. "This is unusual," she said, "but not unprecedented," Maya added smoothly. A beat. Then Russell stepped forward, tone measured. "This is clearly an emotional disruption, Your Honor. We, my wife and I, were told by professionals that Claire was compromised. She disappeared for years. She disappeared, I said, cutting him off because she was erased. He didn't flinch. He just folded his hands behind his back like we were in a boardroom, not a courtroom. The judge looked from him to me. To be clear, she said, "You are asserting that your death was falsely declared and that legal documents were submitted under fraudulent pretenses." "Yes, Your Honor," I said, "and I have the evidence." She paused. "This matter will require identity verification through official channels. 30 days. You will return then." The gavel fell. Motion recorded. Hearing continued. Room adjourned. I turned once more toward the people who called themselves my family. "You buried me on paper," I said softly, "and I'm here to show you how I dig." Then I walked out. The blazer held firm on my shoulders, and for the first time in years, I wasn't wearing anything borrowed. The second hearing was held 31 days later. Long enough for the media to pick up the story, but not long enough for the rumors to settle. They called me the ghost heir. Sometimes the daughter who returned, but they never called me by my full name. Inside the courtroom, the energy was different. Not shocked expectant. The air was tight heavy with the sound of paper shuffling, heels clicking, and phones set to silent, but always watching. I sat between Maya and Caleb, a folder of documents in my lap. Across from us, Russell looked bored. Jacob tapped his foot under the table like a boxer waiting for a bell. Charlotte stared straight ahead, palms folded wedding band twisting slightly on her finger. In the back row, Ivy sat alone. The judge entered. Case number 20483, Whitmore v. Whitmore motioned to reverse, declared death, and restore legal identity. Maya stood first, then Caleb, then me. We walked the court through everything, the forged death certificate, the fake psych evaluation written by a doctor who'd never met me, the shell companies, the wire transfers, the $2.4 million loan tied to a forged passport, and the memo marked Phase 2, discredit plus invalidate. Then it was Ivy's turn. She approached the witness stand, manila envelope clutched tight. Her voice shook just once. "I found this in Dad's home office," she said. "They weren't worried she was unstable. They were worried she'd come back." She handed the judge a printed email thread, one between my father and their legal consultant. Subject line, "If she resurfaces." The judge read in silence, then looked back at me. "Miss Whitmore," she said, "do you wish to address the court?" I stood slowly. "I didn't die," I said. "I disappeared because that felt safer than staying. I disappeared because silence was the only way I knew to survive a family that couldn't stand my voice. But I came back. Not for money, not for revenge, just for something simple. The truth with my name on it." The room held still. Even Russell said nothing. Even Jacob, fists clenched, didn't speak. The judge nodded once. Motion granted. Identity reinstated. All estate transfers suspended pending federal investigation. This court recognizes Claire Elaine Whitmore as legally alive and in full capacity. Gavel. Done. I didn't look at them when I left. They didn't reach for me either. But as I stepped through the courthouse doors into the afternoon light, Ivy followed. She didn't speak, just slipped a folded note into my hand. In her handwriting, I couldn't undo what they did. "But I believe you were never gone." And for the first time, I felt the past break just slightly, enough to walk forward without dragging it. 6 months later, I opened the doors to a place called the Whitmore Room. I didn't keep the name because I forgave them. I kept it so they'd never be able to pretend I didn't exist. It wasn't much, just a converted walk-up in downtown New Haven. 3 rooms, 1 coffee machine, and a wall of corkboard where we let survivors post their truths on yellow sticky notes. Some were short. He said I imagined it. They told me I should be grateful. I believed them until now. Most ended with no punctuation. Just open wounds turned outward so they could finally breathe. The work we did wasn't glamorous legal aid resource, matching quiet advocacy for people erased by systems that should have protected them. Not all of them had families like mine. Some had worse. But we shared one thing. We were all alive. And we weren't letting anyone write us out again. On the morning of our first workshop, a package arrived. No return address. Wrapped in soft gray paper, hand-tied with a piece of ribbon I hadn't seen since childhood. Inside was a flat portfolio. No note, just a familiar sketch. My blazer, the one I'd designed at 24, folded away during the Mexico trip. Thought lost. The corners were worn, edges smudged with ink, but I knew it was mine. There was only one change, a handwritten line at the bottom in a script I hadn't seen in months. You were always meant to stand. Mom. I stared at the paper for a long time. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. Some wounds don't bleed, they just harden into quiet resolve. That night I opened a new sketchbook, not for fashion. I drew out a blueprint, a second shelter. Legal clinic on site, kitchen facing the street. I labeled each room not with numbers but with names, clarity. Shelter. Anchor. Rise. I wasn't going back. I wasn't building to remember them. I was building so no one else would have to disappear to survive. I wasn't unstable. I was inconvenient, and they needed that gone. If you've ever been erased just to keep someone else comfortable, I see you.